Hello. Welcome to the Apple Insider podcast. I'm William Gallagher. Our sponsor this week is Masterclass, actually a particular favourite of mine. Details about that later. And I'm joined by Wes Hilliard, who this week has what I think is a particularly good topic for Apple Insider Plus, the extended edition of the podcast for paid subscribers. Now, Wes, hello, but you suggested this while I was eating a biscuit, so frankly I could just nod so enthusiastically that crumbs flew everywhere. It was horrible. If anybody listening could just put down their biscuits for a moment, what's the topic?
So this week we want to talk about what companies or apps, anyway, we would like to see Apple purchase in the future. I think that would be a very fun topic considering the news that we'll get to later.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a couple in mind that I wouldn't mind seeing fall into Apple's purview anyway.
If you haven't already, you can get Apple Insider Plus by subscribing either to our Patreon or via Apple Podcast subscriptions. Links to both are in the show notes, and it would be good to have you with us. And if you have already subscribed, thank you. Now, news this week, slightly dominated by something that happened over there in America. Wes, you're kind of closer to me. What's the Apple relevance to what's been going on?
Yes, no need to get into anything crazy here. We're not that kind of show, but if you'd like to talk to us about it, you can always send us an email. That's fine. Tim Cook and many tech CEOs did reach out to the winner of the presidential election and congratulated him, which honestly is normal. I think it's pretty funny, actually. Every time this happens, everyone's shocked. They're all like, "Oh, they're bootlickers," or they're laying the groundwork for a deal. It's just like it's the president. We elected them. It doesn't matter if you like him or not. I mean, these companies rely heavily on government interaction, whether it's regulation or through lobbying, but of course they're going to court their favor. That's just what they do, especially these huge CEOs. I just don't see like Tim Cook protesting and sitting out talking to the president when so much of the business relies on a good interaction with the government. So, I mean, I understand people. The same thing happened with like Biden and everything too when he won in 2020. It's just like why are these CEOs talking to the president? It's because it's a business. They have to interact with these entities. It's normal. So I find the outrage a little bit amusing every single time, as if like the CEO of the most profitable company in the United States is just going to refuse to talk to the president or something. I don't really understand what people want here. But that happened. Cool. I mean, I'm sure we're going to get more fun things like Tim Apple or maybe another tour of a Texas facility. Maybe not for a Mac Pro this time. Maybe they'll tour a semiconductor fab in Arizona or something. That would be cool. But yeah,
there you go. Yeah,
we'll see
like
general
that.
regular interactions like this, and I just ask people to maybe settle down a little bit. We did elect him. I understand it's not fun for the people who didn't want that, but it doesn't mean that like all of a sudden Apple is or like Tim Cook is this awful, terrible human being or whatever. I just don't understand the reaction.
Right, I got to tell you from over here, I didn't actually appreciate that there was outrage over this because my first thought when I heard about Tim Cook saying this was, this might be a whole US-UK thing. In America, are you familiar with a thing called the Profumo affair? I'm suddenly not sure I'm pronouncing that right. About a 1960s British. The more I talk about it, the odds of you knowing it are less. So Mandy Rice Davis, that's the famous part of it. Is she known to you at all in the States?
Did not cover that in our history class.
All right. Well, you'll love this. I mean, compared to today, it's an incredibly slight scandal, but it was huge in the 60s. Sex, lying to the Parliament, all this kind of stuff. Mandy Rice Davis, who was a model, was caught up in all of this, was, doorstepped or something by the press, who said that Lord Astor would have been the person who was accused of all this, had denied having an affair with her. And she said, well, he would, wouldn't he? And that line has just rung through politics ever since. Because, of course, that's what happens. Anyway, that's enough, I think, politics.
I just find it all amusing.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I get it. Send your emails, fine. I understand people are going to disagree, and this is a very important situation, and we're not going to get into it here. It's just the ways in which people react and the fervor that things happen in these situations will never not be somewhat amusing to me, because it's just, I don't know, sit down, relax. What is this reaction? What is this anger going to achieve beyond your blood pressure being high, right? Just have some tea.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I like the tea reference. Thank you for throwing me a bone there. Even over here in the UK, I'm aware it's an interesting time, and I would like to get away from all of it. So, in fact, let's leave all politics aside and instead talk about European Union politics. Totally different. Because I think, again, even though I'm slightly closer to the EU than you, you know about the history of this, because the EU is apparently about to fine Apple, or probably about to fine Apple for failure to complying with the Digital Markets Act, which is actually something I think they've been threatening for ages, but apparently now it's a
big tease. This is just like the investigation in the United States into Apple being antitrust. Any day now, they're going to announce the results of the investigation. It's just, do it. You know, if you have all of this power, you wrote this Digital Markets Act to give you all of this power to fine up to 10 to 20% of a company's annual profits or revenue. Just do it already. I mean, if you really want to exercise this power, exercise it. Stop with the idle threats, because Apple has obviously done what they're going to do. And from the first day of the DMA and Apple's controversial compliance that they did, which by the letter of the law, they did comply. It's just, according to the EU's watchdogs, Apple did not comply with the spirit of the law, which is the issue that has led us through these months of backs and forths, and Apple changing its rules and whittling away at the edges to the point where Apple has almost taken away every portion of everything that they announced initially, except for the fee that they're going to charge. I forget what it's called, but the core technology fee is going to apply to 1% of developers, and Apple's removed every portion of any hint of anti-steering rules, and yet still we're talking about a potential fine. I just do not understand what the EU wants at this point, so just fine them. If that's what you want to do, just do it, because what is Apple supposed to do in this situation?
Well, whatever Spotify tells them, could that be it? No, this is getting... Apple sticking to the letter of the regulations. Well, they would, wouldn't they? You see, once you've heard that phrase, it's with you forever. That's going to be going on, and the EU might actually be pausing in its contemplation of how much money it can get from Apple by instead focusing on you, over there, Corning. Yeah, we're looking at you. People who make glass. Maybe other people should make glass as well. This isn't it the Corning monopoly of smartphone screen market. I mean, if every smartphone maker buys from the same place, isn't it because they get the best deal?
Is there some other up-and-coming glass maker that's just angry that they can't sell to Apple? Like, is there a family business in the middle of, downtown Germany just begging to be the next Samsung Galaxy glass cover? I understand there's other glass makers in the world. I'm being sarcastic. It's just, I don't know. Corning has definitely monopolized the market, but I think this gets back to our earlier discussions of, does success automatically mean regulation? Does it automatically mean monopolization? Is Corning doing something here that isn't legal, or are they abusing their power? And that's where the investigation comes in. The EU hasn't done anything yet, to be clear. This is their opening investigations. They notice that, Corning is everywhere, so maybe we should look into this. But they haven't determined it to be a legal monopoly or anything like that. So we'll see where it goes. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, but the DMA, by how it was written, was meant to protect consumers from monopolies and give them a fair ability to make decisions and purchase products and have use of those products and install the software they want, right? It's kind of wide, the bill is, and it's unspecific. And because of that, it seems that they've been uneven in how they're handling each company, right? The way they're handling Google is different from how they're handling Apple, and it feels like it's all going to kind of just blow up in the end, because I'm not sure if it's the politicians, I'm not sure what's going on here, but it all comes down to money, and it seems to be less and less about the consumer. But that's maybe just my opinion.
No, I think the same, although I should qualify as a British man sounding like he's criticising the European Union. We've got Brexit behind me and things like that. I'm actually, in general, very, very pro-Europe. And even in this, although I am quite stridently disagreeing on certain aspects of it and the implementation of it, I got to note that the European Union got laws in place where no one else has yet, and everywhere else is trying. So,
to be fair and equal and balanced here, I mean, when the
credit.
United States was investigating Apple for these same issues, it was the same thing. It's just, what do you expect Apple to do here? And I mean, I understand the problem, right? The walled garden, the ecosystem. But if anyone else wanted to do what Apple was doing, they should just do it. If Google, instead of racing to the bottom, made premium devices with a vertically integrated ecosystem and a locked-in operating system, they could just do that and compete on equal footing with Apple. But none of these companies are willing to compete the same way Apple does, and they're angry that they're not making the same profits, so they complain to the government so that they target Apple and their business model. Apple's business model was a success resoundingly across the globe. So we're going to punish them for it. I get when monopolies abuse their power. And I understand, too, to say, I understand that Apple has some problems with how they're handling their business, for sure. But
well, you and I had that AppleInsider Plus a few weeks ago, really damning some of the bad things Apple does, which happened to be also the week that Apple's podcast back engine mysteriously failed to work.
There's certain things regulations should cover and do, but I do believe that this is not how it should be handled, and I think they're overreaching a little bit. Because, again, Apple is complying with the law, but not in the way that they like it. And that's then write the law better. That's my answer. No. Stop. Like, I don't. If you want them to just make iOS open and distribute it to Android people, make that the law, right? If you want the App Store to be free of anti-steering and allow multiple external app stores to be installed on iOS, make that the law. Whatever it is now doesn't say that. It's very vague and very open to interpretation, and that's why we keep having this conversation. It's exhausting. I get so tired of this regulation nonsense because it feels broken, and the government that generally tries to regulate tech never understands tech. So,
that's shockingly true, yes. On the one hand, I want to say stop giving politicians' ideas there, please. But also, I feel bad about this because the next thing I want to ask you about is regulation. It's totally different, though. I don't understand how this works. The topic, what's been going on this week is Apple. Everybody keeps saying Apple has bought Pixelmator, and that's not strictly true. Pixelmator has agreed to be acquired pending regulatory approval. And I don't understand what the regulatory approval is in this. I don't think Pixelmator is a gigantic developer. It's an excellent one. So why would any regulator be that fussed? It's like, how many companies does Apple buy?
It's a bureaucratic step. Every company has to be approved. And even though we don't hear about every company Apple buys, they buy, 100 a year or something like that. It's but of all these little companies, they acquire mostly the teams and the talent and maybe a patent portfolio. In this case, they're acquiring the team specifically. And they're going to own the assets of the app, but the question is will the app continue? And I'm not sure, but I think there's a million ways this could go. Obviously, Apple acquiring Pixelmator, I think for me, I'm excited because Pixelmator is an excellent app. It offers amazing tools. Pixelmator Pro on the Mac is the go-to editor. That if I could have that on my iPad, it would be a dream. But for some reason, they're only going to do Photomator on iPad so far, which is basically a souped-up Apple Photos app. So I wonder, and I do think the name will change just because this is just how Apple does things. Like workflow became shortcuts, dark sky just became part of weather. I expect that this is just going to become part of Photos in some way. So Photomator might go away and become basically Photos, and maybe we'll get a little bit of the editing UI, maybe some of the filtering options. I'm not sure. The repair tool is actually really excellent. The layering tools are really good. So Photomator becoming part of Photos, I think makes a lot of sense. I think that's just going to happen. The question in the air for me is what's going to happen to Pixelmator Pro, because that is a photo powerhouse that can compete with Amazon tools. Like I would use it over Affinity Designer. I use it over anything else, but I don't have access to it on iPad, so I tend to use Affinity Designer when I need that kind of layering editor. So what do you think's going to happen here?
Well, actually, I think we should say because, I mean, I'm addicted to Pixelmator Pro, so I assume everybody is. People may not realize the company, it's an image-making company. It's been around for 17 years, they said. And they make, we've talked about Pixelmator Pro and Photomator, but there is also Pixelmator non-Pro that I think is still on the Mac, can't remember now, but is on the iPad. And it's fine. It's good. But it isn't Pixelmator Pro. And you've said before how much you would love Pixelmator Pro to be on the iPad. One of the things I thought of when I heard about this is maybe this is the chance. Maybe Apple will give it the resources. When Apple acquired Dark Sky, everything in Dark Sky fitted into weather. So it just seemed inevitable that it would become weather and that Dark Skies and that would go away. And, you know, there are other problems because Dark Sky was also on Android and PCs and that died. Plus, Dark Skies sold its weather data to dozens of other weather app things, and they had to find a new source. So that was bad for the industry, but good for the weather app. In this case, I think this is like there's a phrase, isn't there? A saturation point, maybe. There's only so much a liquid can carry, and I think if you put Photomator into Photos, it'd just about work. But if you try to put Pixelmator Pro in there, it just can't. No, it's like would be putting Photoshop into I don't know what the equivalent is other than into photo. Let's go with that, William, into Photos for it. So Pixelmator, I don't think will go in. That doesn't mean it won't go away. I mean, I quite like the idea that Pixelmator becomes part of the, well, we still call it the iWork suite, although Apple hardly ever uses that term. Pages, Numbers, and Keynote. If they suddenly had one called, I don't know, Pictures, or something like that.
Well, we have a name
that was
for
actually
this,
Pixelmator
Aperture.
Pro. That could work, yeah. Right. I loved Aperture at the time, but, you know,
I think
it went away.
there's two ways this could go. It could either remain a separate app. Maybe it could even retain Pixelmator Pro. It could become a toggle in Photos, maybe a Pro mode, where you just, maybe you click a button and it turns on a like advanced editing suite, which I still don't think would fit inside Photos because there's a difference here. So when you're editing a photo in Photos or Photomator, they're similar applications. You're editing hue, saturation, lighting, basic photos things, right? It's basically like you're taking it into a dark room and changing specific portions of the image, right? Light, color, noise, sharpness. You can use a repair tool, that kind of stuff. You're editing a photo. That photo is pretty much the main subject of the editor. You're applying filters. That is it. It is a photo editor. What Pixelmator Pro is and why it doesn't fit into the Photos app is it is a what you'd call like a pixel editor. That's where the name comes from. You're going to have multiple layers. You can drop in objects. You can replicate objects, drag them around. It's this kind of vector tool in its own way. You can draw into the space. You can do the same photo editing to different layers, using the HSL tools, but you can also drop in shapes, add more images. Just there's so much to it. It's what if you've seen Photoshop, that's what Photoshop is as well. Like I said, Affinity Designer. So it's such a different paradigm and interaction that I can't see it existing in Photos without it breaking Photos. It's a different concept. I think Photos would pair well with an app like this. Like, you would have the windows open side by side, but you would not put this system inside of Photos.
I think this might be a good time to say, buy Pixelmator Pro. Yeah. So back when it first started, or at least when I was first aware of it, I don't know, a nice way to say it. It's basically thought, oh, right, a cheap Photoshop knockoff. And I don't think that's unfair, except it's so much more than that. Now, I choose it partly because it has the benefit over Adobe that it's a one-time purchase rather than a subscription. And for what I need, the subscription for Adobe just doesn't seem economic. But also, I just really like it. You mentioned the Affinity tools, and I think the closest to Pixelmator is Affinity Photo. And I for some reason, I have a block on that one. It feels very complicated to me, whereas Pixelmator Pro, I get it, and I really like it.
Well, Affinity Photo is closer to Photomator. I mean, I think there is a layering feature in Affinity Photo, but Affinity Designer is what I'm thinking of when I think of Pixelmator Pro. There's so many apps.
Yeah, although I've got to admit, I absolutely, totally love Affinity Publisher. That's just, we're going off onto favourite apps now. Buy all the apps, that's what I'm saying, while they're still here. But how about this? It's not good enough to just buy an app. You have to have something to run it on. And, well, last week we got the announcement of 3 new things to run them on. And this week, actually, as we record this, on the day this podcast goes out, the first pre-order iMac, Mac Mini and MacBook Pro M4 versions are arriving in people's hands. But that also means they've been arriving in reviewers' hands for at least a couple of days, and there is a roundup of them. You were looking at a Mac Mini earlier. Have you been following what's going on with people's opinions of the new Mac Mini?
They love it. I mean, there was no doubt in my mind that this was going to be the winner amongst all of the new Macs, but it's just adorable. It's small. It has an excellent port selection. I mean, what can you do here? You can power it up for thousands of dollars into this crazy little machine. I mean, I'm excited for it, for sure.
It's funny, isn't it? You talk about it with obvious glee, and so does everybody who's reviewing it. All of them are just... I mean, there's a bit of me that wants to say, it's just another Mac Mini, or it's just another Mac. Even I think that. But still, you get caught up in, it's so small, it's so powerful, and the price is such a good deal for it. That, yes, that's what everybody's saying. That's the one to buy. Except... people have been using the new iMac, and I love this one because there's slightly more variety here. I think it was The Verge who said, it's a nice computer. It's like shrug kind of thing. But then went into, well, it performs very well, fine. And then talked about the colours. Everyone talks about the colours, and I'm really up for this because I think you've got this in front of your face for 10 hours a day or something. A nice colour is a good thing. But it's quite funny, I think, how excited everybody is about the vibrancy of the colours. Justine hugged her new pink one, and somebody was trying out the yellow one. I can't remember who it was now. And I personally wouldn't have gone for yellow, but they loved it for it. Myself, I'd buy blue, but... the colours are great. And can you believe? We need to get serious here and technical. I need specifications. What's the Pantone number for each of these colours? Kind of things. Okay. Do you know, I should look that up and put them in the show notes. Let's see whether I do or not. I do remember people testing to try to match the colour of some iPhone. Was it the purple iPhone? And finally NKBHD just did a Pantone reading on it or something and worked it out. But that does leave the MacBook Pro, which I don't want to say anybody's given anything a bad review, because I don't think I've read a single negative review about any of these machines, which is a little unusual. But of the 3 announcements, the MacBook Pro is getting the least praise, but it seems for an odd reason. It's like Well, I don't mean to keep going back to Manager Rose Davis, but it would be better, wouldn't it? That is basically the tone of some of them. It's the best MacBook Pro ever made, but duh, what else were they going to do? It's this much faster, but it always is. And a lot of complaints I'm reading about how the design is exactly the same, or very, very nearly exactly the same as the previous ones. But then everybody accepting that the design works. So what can you do? Poor old MacBook Pro is not getting the love that it should.
I predicted this, didn't I? I mean, the iPad Mini 7 is identical except for a chipset change, and it didn't get anything else. The MacBook Pro did get nano texture and a couple of other small upgrades, but overall, yes, it looks identical on the outside case. And I don't know why reviewers do this. I maybe it's to reflect consumers, because consumers at the same time do look at things and say, well, it looks the same, doesn't it? But alternatively, I think you have to consider there's really not much else you can do, especially in a laptop form factor. What are you going to do, add a touch bar? I mean, that would be crazy, wouldn't
it? Yes. Someone was arguing that the inverted T shape of the arrow keys was a pain because it's so small and so non-standard. I've never really noticed it myself, but I see that's
some people are arrowing
criticism
around, I guess. Mm-hmm. I think it's just human nature, and I'm actually putting together an iPad Mini 7 review right now, and I'm discussing a lot of these concepts, but I do think it's human nature to look at something and say, well, that's boring, nothing changed about it, and then you look at a new design, and you're like, oh, wow, it's so shiny and new, and of course, that's just how our brains work. But I think a part of being a reviewer is you're supposed to kind of go against that and say, well, we know it's the same on the outside, but this is what's different on the inside, and the M4 line is incredibly powerful, but I think arguably so isn't the M3 and the M2 and the M1. And the question is who should be upgrading? And I think that's where people are coming down on the MacBook Pro of, yeah, they could build this. Of course they did. It's faster, it's better, but why? Why, do we need an annual MacBook cycle? Do you remember when when Intel was always bad and never was able to come out with chipsets on a regular interval, so we would just kind of wait around until a Mac appeared, and Apple would just be like, here's a Mac, and you're like, yes, finally, a Mac. And now it's just clockwork, and everyone's just like, who cares? I remember when Apple Silicon first arrived, and people were like, yeah, we can finally have a consistent release cycle, this is so exciting. And now we have a consistent release cycle, and people are like, this is so boring. It's just like, what do you want? I don't know. I think
I got my 14-inch MacBook Pro and M1 in part through a grant from the Arts Council of England for a particular project I was doing. What they actually funded was the then current 13-inch MacBook Pro. But I was so sure, there were so many rumors that a 14-inch was coming that I held on and held on. I knew it'd be more expensive. I knew I'd have to put, as it turns out, an amazing amount of money towards it myself. But still, it was a nice grant for this. And was it 3 days before I had to file the final financial report of everything I'd spent on the project? They finally brought it out and I could buy it. It was quite tense in those days.
I think it's just funny, but I don't know. Reviewers sometimes forget their job. I think they spend too much time looking at themselves and what they want to do with a PC or computer or why they would upgrade, and they forget that they buy everything, they review everything, and Apple needs to wow them to keep a lot of these machines because it's expensive, because they buy everything. Whereas for the consumer, they don't buy everything. A lot of people are still sitting on that M1, like me and you. We still have that M1 models of these Macs, and we're looking and saying, well, maybe it's time. And even us, we're extreme nerds. Let's think about just everyone else. People just go buy computers. And why shouldn't Apple just upgrade the chip every year? And then when someone needs a computer and goes and buys one, they get the best possible chip. It's not that it needs to be this dramatic upgrade or this Steve Jobs needs to walk out and pull something out of an envelope every 6 months. We don't need that kind of hype. I don't know what has maybe Apple has done it to themselves, maybe with their own hype cycles. I think other companies have definitely done it. Google comes to mind with their DJ sets and loud music during their events. But They really want people to be excited about their products, and then the product they announce is the same product with a better chip, and everyone's just like, huh, that's it, huh? Right? Yeah. And I think that's perfectly fine. The alternative is no update. So, of course, everyone wants a redesign, and a redesign will come. We'll see a new MacBook Pro form factor in 2030, right? But we'll see an iPad Mini 8 or 9 with a new design. It's inevitable. Apple does iterate on these designs. But the expectation that every single upgrade needs to be this incredible design alteration, this thing only Apple can do, is just not tenable. Like, it's not sustainable. It's bad for the environment, right? There's just so many reasons why you shouldn't redesign a product every 2 years. I mean, they built the thing. Should they not be committed to it for a while? At the end of the day, people just buy computers sometimes, and Apple having the best possible chipset available on the market in every one of their computers on an annual cycle works for the market, and it's best for the consumer. It doesn't matter what the reviewer thinks at the end of the day of, well, my M3 still works, so I'm not going to buy the M4. It's not for you. Apple didn't build this for you, YouTuber. They built it for literally the rest of the planet that buys these in droves. So I think the cells speak for themselves. This model works, whether or not people think it's boring.
Yeah, I see your point, but I raise you that every PC manufacturer has a radically and innovative and brilliant new design every 6 to 8 months. So, I could not think of a PC manufacturer. Lenovo.
Dell? Oh,
yes,
Gateway.
Lenovo.
Gateway.
Dell.
Right?
Dell. Oh, Gateway.
You remember the cows?
Vaguely. Yeah. Yeah, I remember Dell being presented as the absolute model of how to create a business, and then it shot itself in the foot several times. It was actually the presentation where somebody put out them as this thing, and I was waiting for them to say, and then they shot themselves in the foot, and they didn't, because they hadn't. They prepared their speech 10 years before and had never updated it. So I asked a pointed question, but that's a long time ago. One thing about design, then. You're saying that about reviewers not being like, well, real people. And I have seen that a lot, not just in hardware and Mac stuff, but across entertainment reviews. A thing that surprised me when I was reading reviews of the MacBook Pro was a couple of really vehemently angry comments about the notch. Now, I mean, that seems very old news to me, but also I look right now at my MacBook screen, and what I think is that Apple has stretched the screen up on two corners. I don't think of it as they've dug a notch into it, but apparently it distracts some people. And this is the thing that perturbed me, that's the word. One of the reviewers said that the notch had hidden a couple of dialog boxes. Now, hidden dialog boxes at least more than once during my testing. I don't know how you could get a dialog box underneath the notch. So am I just thick, or is this nonsense?
The notch gets clicks. It's a good shocker value on YouTube or TikTok. That's all. A lot of media consumption's going this way. You have a quarter of a millisecond to get someone to watch your 6-second video on TikTok. So you have to go in there and say, hey, you, viewer, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. It killed my grandmother. It's the notch on the MacBook Pro. It's so bad. It's bad. And it's actually not bad. They're just exaggerating to get to drive clicks. I honestly believe that anyone who tries to seriously say the notch is a bad thing is just lying for clicks. I genuinely believe that, because it's such a non-issue. It's not an issue. I don't know how else to say it.
This episode is brought to you by Masterclass. Whatever field you work in, and actually I think more importantly, whatever field you want to work in, Masterclass has the most exceptional people teaching you what you need to know. I mean, I'm a writer. I can only imagine how much I would learn from, say, Aaron Sorkin. I mean, that's if I could afford him. That's if he even does any teaching. That's if I could just get in touch with the man. Masterclass already did. Aaron Sorkin has made hours of videos from Masterclass, and so has Margaret Atwood, Walter Mosley, Shonda Rhimes. In all, 35 of the world's greatest living writers are right here on Masterclass, and that's just in the writing category. Plus, I must say, it's not like they're online at YouTube or something. It's like they are there with you. These really well-produced videos. They must be watched by thousands, but it feels like it is solely for you. Just you and this person you admire, this person you might want to be. Writers, artists, sports people, chefs, scientists, actors. There are over 200 people teaching you what you want to know. And you get the lot for $10 a month. $10 a month. In any other way, $10 would not get you a single second with any of these people. They are so busy. Yet, instead, you get hours and hours with them. Plus, one thing I found, actually, is that it pays to look around into categories you wouldn't necessarily normally consider. As I say, I'm a writer, but I think I've actually learned most from Masterclass from Jodie Fisher's series on directing films. Now, I don't happen to plan to direct major motion pictures, but she is so interesting about it, so frank about it, how it's done, and also how directors like her work with writers like me. Jodie Fisher is riveting, and all of Masterclass's teachers are the absolute best in their fields. I think you've gathered I like this, and right now our listeners get an additional 15% off any annual membership at masterclass.com/AppleInsider15. So that's 15% off at masterclass.com/AppleInsider15. Apple Insider is one word, 15 are the digits. So masterclass.com/AppleInsider15. And thank you to Masterclass for supporting the Apple Insider podcast. It's like Betteridge's Law then, isn't it? Actually, that's known under a couple of different names. I don't know if that's a UK again thing, but Betteridge's Law is the rule of journalism that says if a headline is a question, the answer
Betteridge
is no.
is great, yeah.
But it
excellent
will take
follow
ages.
on the socials,
yeah.
by the way.
Oh, cool. Okay. I'm aware that this is going to sound bad because we've only just got these three new nice Macs, and we waited for quite a while for them, and it's all very exciting. And now that they're here, I'm instantly going to go on to but the next thing is more yet again rumours of a lower price Apple Vision Pro headset. You are Mr. Apple Vision Pro to me. I don't mean to put all that burden on you, but I have done. Is there any more credence in the lower cost rumours and the delays to Apple Vision Pro 2 or something this week compared to, say,
I'm
going to
put a stake in the ground here and just say this is just wrong. This is incorrect. So Ming-Chi Kuo for a while has not been on his game. Something happened to his supply chain partners. I don't know, but he's become a blogger more than a actual analyst in the last couple of years. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It's just he stepped away from publishing his secret notes on a industry website to using medium.com to write his opinions. It's a very different game. And in that, as we've been paying attention to him, he's been slipping on certain things. Different ideas just are not the most accurate as they used to be, or some of them are reported as news, as leaks, but they're actually his opinions. And this one appears to be like him saying, "Oh, this is a supply chain," but it says, as I understand it, production of the cheaper Apple Vision Pro has been delayed beyond 2027 for a while now. There's so many things here. The cheaper Apple Vision Pro is the next headset, but to say that it is delayed beyond 2027, that is 3 years from now. So beyond that, even to 2028, 2029, meaning Apple just cannot find a way to make this headset less expensive. And the argument here is, seemingly, according to comments and replies to this, is Apple can't make it less expensive enough, so that even if Apple made it less expensive, it would still be more than $1,000, more than 3 times the price of most competitors. And Apple just is seriously considering not even bothering with a cheaper headset because it's not in the competitive market, which is just not how Apple operates. That's complete baloney. Apple loves releasing things that are 3 times more expensive than the market. They release something 12 times more expensive than the market, and it's called the Apple Vision Pro. So I don't understand this report other than it being salacious enough to be reported. And I'm not trying to accuse Ming Chi Kuo of anything. I think it's a poor take on information that he has on hand. And my belief is also, just to say, the M5 Apple Vision Pro successor, that, it's going to be the Pro 0.5 or whatever. I think we're going to hear, 2025 until it gets to 2025, and they're going to say, well, it's suddenly delayed, because my call for that has always been it's coming mid to late 2026. I know I don't have any information other than gut feelings and other rumors, but I'm standing by that. If it changes, great. I'm surprised. Fun. I get to be wrong, but I'm just going to tell the listeners here, maybe hold out a little longer. I think the next Apple Vision Pro, late 2026 at the earliest. Now, this rumor of the cheaper one just disappearing or getting pushed back several years, I'm not buying it. I'm still riding that line of we could hear it alongside the successor Vision Pro. We could hear it in late 26 instead of the Vision Pro, but it just being pushed out because of some weird pricing concern, I think that's just completely opposite of what Apple normally does, and the reporting, I think, is bad on this.
What you said there about Ming Chi Kuo, who used to definitely be an analyst, like you said, and now blogs. I've seen that. Sometimes he's very clear, this is from supply chain. Other times he doesn't say anything and you assume it's his own extrapolation, but on a lot of years of experience for it. But recently he does seem to not quite bother to say which is which, and it leaves you hanging for it. But there are other people saying similar things. I just I freely admit this, I don't understand a lot of things I'm reading. There's publication called the Elec, which included some very technical detail, technical to me anyway, about types of display. And it seemed to boil down to that it's possible Apple will accept. I'm actually, I'm mixing up things here, because I had similar stories about OLED displays on the MacBook Pro and cheaper displays on the Apple Vision Pro. Apple Vision Pro story was that they're working and might be accepting quite low resolution, so less than half the resolution for it. And at the same time, separately, Apple might accept an OLED MacBook Air screen, which is not as good an OLED screen as eventually is expected to come to the MacBook Pro. Is there an argument that Apple is accepting less and less in terms of quality from people rather than waiting?
Is there an example of that exists today?
No.
These are all speculation based on rumor. Apple investigates a lot of different ideas. They're obviously investigating cheaper products. Does that mean it's ever going to ship? Depends on the company. Under Tim Cook's leadership, I very seriously doubt it. He would rather wait until components become less expensive and chase something more premium rather than send out something now that is much cheaper. We saw it with Apple Vision Pro. We saw it with different products like the iPad moving to OLED. So it's just one of those things. Apple doesn't need to cheapen itself. Is there a place in the market that suggests Apple is doomed or making less money because they're not cheapening themselves?
Yes. Probably, but they're probably almost certainly wrong as well. It's the Apple is doomed kind of thing. But you just said in there that Apple is testing things, and we know they are. I mean, there's actual literal evidence in the thousands of patents and all sorts of things. And obviously they're testing things, but actually also in this week, we've learned that Apple is using some sort of internal study, apparently, to find out whether people are interested in smart glasses or things. And I have a problem with that. Because if it's true that it's happening now, I feel like Apple's had 10 years to ask people what they think.
So this survey it happened with Apple Vision Pro right before Apple Vision Pro came out. So take that for what you will. Apple surveyed employees to find out what they thought of VR headsets. And we don't know what the purpose of the survey was. I don't think it was to design the Apple Vision Pro, because at that point it would have already been designed. So I think the same situation here with the VR, AR glasses, whatever it is, Apple Glass, we've dubbed them. I think we need to come up with a new name. Yeah, so with the Apple Glass rumors, it's the same as with the Apple Vision Pro, with the internal survey basically asking, hey, these are what Facebook Meta is doing. This is what X-Real Reality is doing. What do you think they're doing here? That works? That doesn't work? I don't know what this means for the production timeline of these augmented reality glasses, but I think Apple's it's just an investigation. Hey, what should we be targeting here? And how long do we need to be working on this? So rumors are still completely guesswork for these glasses. They could come out next year. They could come out in 2030. We have no idea. So I don't think this means anything. It's just progress continues. Apple is working on smart glasses that will eventually run Vision OS, the same as Apple Vision Pro. And I think they're going to be sold in tandem. I don't think it's going to be a replacement.
Still a curious thing of adding a survey at this point. But, we don't know what they're after, really. Maybe they just want a really cracking marketing quote or two. Though Apple doesn't tend to do that. Our unnamed engineer says, doesn't really crop up very often in the PR. But this is, again, we're talking about things that we know they're going to happen in some form, at some way, but we can actually pull this back to now, because a thing has happened this week, which actually you've mentioned before. I can't remember if it had already come or you knew it was here. The ability on the Apple Vision Pro to use something like my ultra widescreen display for the Mac. Sorry, I need to explain to you, a Mac is a brilliant computer.
We're using it right now. It's to record the podcast. One day, William, I will not need a Mac for this. One day.
Oh.
No, so this is interesting. I've tested it out once. Cool. I love it. I think this is what we talked about before with the Mac Mini, turning it into a little portable guy with a battery, that kind of stuff. This is really interesting as a way to interact with the Mac. So virtual Mac display, bring it in. It's 4K, regular, what you'd say studio display dimensions. You can expand it to be the size of 40-foot window above a lake, sure. But it's still that rectangular iMac style display. Now you can make it a wide display with the resolution of two 4K displays side by side, or expand that all the way to ultra wide. And the resolution of the ultra wide is so wide, it's like, I don't know, 10,000 pixels wide by something long. It's ridiculous. It's more than actually the resolution that is available in the Apple Vision Pro. But it works because of foveated rendering. So wherever you're looking inside of the monitor, this ultra-wide monitor is getting rendered at what your eyes perceive as a 4K resolution. So basically, you're always getting a 4K monitor, doesn't matter how big you make it. And you can make this thing really big. So I did the ultra-wide setting, made it as big as possible, pushed it away from me. And William, you have to crane your neck all the way to the left, all the way to the right, all the way up, all the way down to see this entire monitor. It is ridiculous. I had to walk across the house from my office to my living room to the farthest corner of the house, turn around and look back at the monitor in order to fit all of it into my viewfinder. It's ridiculous.
But the thing I've been hearing about this is not only, this is good, but also the way it was before. That was terrible. It was so cramped. You couldn't see anything. So was there any truth in that it was rubbish before and only now is okay?
I'm using it now. I'm looking at the regular size display to record this podcast through my Vision Pro, and it looks like my studio display just floating in air at Lake Vrangla or whatever. Like it's a monitor. I think it's a recency bias maybe. This old thing, it looks so crummy next to this new thing. No, the regular size is fine. Honestly, I'm going to keep using it because I want it next to other windows and not taking over my entire vision, because it's very rare that I'm using just a Mac. I'm usually using like the Vision Pro
Yes.
apps. Like right now I have Safari and Notes open in Vision Pro, not in the Mac. So
Right, I have two Macs in front of me. Maybe I'm making up for you. That's what it is. I'm compensating for
there's
your
still
lack
a
of
Mac
Macness
here.
there. Yeah,
Only
but
just.
Have you got any further with the thinking of trading it in somehow or selling it and buying it in for
It's such a
Mac
difficult
Mini?
market. The M3 MacBook Pro was on sale the other day for like $1,000, and I'm just like, I can't compete with that. I don't know how I'm going to sell this thing unless I sell it for like $500, and it just hurts me internally to do that. So I'm just I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I do intend eventually selling it. I didn't need a Mac Mini on the release day. Like this MacBook Pro is still doing it for me, but the goal is eventually in the next couple of months, I'm going to sell the MacBook Pro and get a Mac Mini. Absolutely.
Although for me, one of the reasons for having two Macs is that I have had occasions over a long time when the main computer I'm using has died for whatever reason. Being able to instantly switch to a different one has been how I've earned enough money to pay for the repair to fix the first one. That might actually be, I might be projecting that memory from working on PCs onto Macs because I don't think I've had a Mac go that badly wrong that
I
long.
replace it often enough that I don't think I'll ever run into that. I'm okay with having one Mac. I just it hurts when you pay for something. And I know it was 3 years ago, right? 2021 was when these MacBook Pros came out, and I got the M1 Pro. I paid $2,200 for this 512 gig M1 Pro MacBook Pro, 16 gigs of RAM, and now the market might let me sell it for $700-800, and that just I don't like it. I never like selling things like that.
But you could look at it this way: you would never be able to. Well, actually, you would. I was going to say you'd never be able to buy a Mac for that little. But if everybody's selling them for that little, you would. So that doesn't work. Okay, ignore that brilliant financial. I should say there's no financial advice.
My usual methodology for selling something is if I can't get enough out of it that I'd be willing to pay to keep it, then I'm just going to pay to keep it, more or less. But in this case, I would not. There would be no benefit to me keeping it. So I might as well just get whatever money I can out of it, even if it's $500-600 and I cry a little. It'll at least go towards the new Mac Mini of some kind. I still haven't decided if it's going to be M4 or M4 Pro, but we'll figure that out.
Also, I suppose you'd be making someone happy, someone who would appreciate the MacBook Pro more than you do. Yeah. Exactly.
I'll find someone who needs it.
We keep dancing around different types of hardware here and things now, but back to software for a bit. There is, I believe I am seeing an improvement in Siri, but I mean, I could be imagining it because all of the real work's supposed to be not coming yet. It hasn't. There are certain irritations in Siri that it hasn't done for me in a couple of weeks. Like when you ask for a 3-minute timer and your watch suddenly starts going to 9 hours, 26 minutes, 4 days or something. That hasn't happened to me in at least 2 weeks. And I have updated betas on everything. But apparently Siri is stepping forward now. We're finally getting to the stage where this is the next bit Apple's looking at. And they're looking at it by giving developers APIs, hooks into it that they can use for things. Do we have any idea yet what they will let people do?
Well, so first of all, the new Siri stuff is interesting because everyone gets it wrong. Even the tech people have been getting it wrong. The only thing that's different right now in 18.1, 18.2 is the animation, the ability to correct yourself while speaking, and general understanding of queries and the ability to continue a query so conversationally, ask a question, then ask another question.
Right.
Those have been improved over time. Some of those existed before, but now Apple is openly saying this is better with Apple Intelligence. But that is it. There's no new quote-unquote AI-powered Siri, and there almost won't be. I think a lot of people thought that Apple Intelligence would just become part of Siri, and in a way it is because it can call out to Apple Intelligence through that program, right? When you're doing type to Siri or using your voice and it's doing a request, that is Apple Intelligence, but it's a very specifically, basically, it's like opening the Apple Intelligence app, more or less. So, like, the Siri that's in your HomePod is still the same old Siri, right? It doesn't have access to Apple Intelligence. So, like, the server side, which is what Siri is, Siri is not actually really on your device. There is some on-device Siri. This is why it's so confusing. But the server side has not changed and probably won't for a while. What is changing is how well it can perform, what it understands. And part of that is this API system. App Intents have existed for ages. It's how things communicate with each other across the device. But Apple has created a new way for App Intents to tie in to Apple Intelligence to give it on-screen recognition of what is happening inside of an app, telling it this is a media app, or this is a book, this is a PDF, this is a website. It's able to share more information and data about what's being viewed, so it can parse it better on the other end and decide whether or not it needs to go to Apple or ChatGPT or what have you. It's already possible to do this in iOS a little bit. Apple has it in some of their applications. If you do type to Siri or whatever while you're on a Safari webpage on your phone and say, what is this? It will use the web page that you're viewing to send information to Apple Intelligence or ChatGPT. And you can actually control the prompt in 18.2 to say, send a screenshot of what I'm viewing or send the entire web page of what I'm viewing, for example. So that's the kind of stuff that we're getting into. It's going to start understanding what is happening, where maybe you're a Chrome user and Google could build that into Chrome, so you could send the entire web page in Chrome that you're viewing, for example. Or if you're in a recipe app, you could do something with that, right? There's ways this can work using the API system.
Do you know, I've realised actually I just lied to you. I said that Siri hasn't been annoying, and in fact, it's been annoying in a brand new way. I think you'll love this. I'd love to know if anybody else gets this as well. When I'm driving, so driving down the road, yeah, right, I've got CarPlay on, yeah, it's playing this podcast, for example, and a text message comes in. Obviously, volume dips on the podcast, it pauses away, and in comes the message. But just every now and again, what I hear is Siri saying, Tim Cook, whatever, in the group says, and then it reads out what Tim Cook has directly said to me. But instead of actual words in English, it's %99 dash exclamation mark shriek asterisk something, and I assumed somebody was swearing at me, but it's just like a decoded message, almost like it's giving me the ASCII values for each character in the message, and it goes on for so long. You don't sound like you've had that wonderful experience. Is it? It can't just be a bug, can it? Yeah. The thing is, I've had to pull over, stop the car to check what the message was, and actually it was swearing. So, I could have just carried on. But there you go. It's an illusion then to me that otherwise Siri is improving.
So, generative,
but I'll take that.
Generative technology, the Chat GPT-ish part of this. So Apple Intelligence as a large language model being applied to Siri. People expect it to be some sort of magical cure-all, that it's going to just somehow become hyper-intelligent and able to do all kinds of stuff. It still needs information, and that information is very localized. Apple hasn't given it world information. It'll have to call to ChatGPT if it needs anything. Like, Apple Intelligence doesn't know what an iPhone is. Let me contradict myself. Unless it's specifically targeting Apple's new help system, which is part of Apple Intelligence, where you can say, hey, tell me about this Apple product, and it'll bring up help pages that it has been fed into. So in the Chat GPT world, if you're a user there, you might be aware of this thing where you can get these, they call them GPTs. They're smaller models inside of the model. And that's basically how Apple has built Apple Intelligence. The entire model is Apple Intelligence. And then there's all these little helper models throughout the system. When you talk to the Apple Intelligence about Apple specific information about helping you clean your device, you're talking to a helper application inside of it that is specifically trained to be a helpful tool. If you're talking to writing tools, it is a helper application that has been taught to be a helpful writing tool. So when you're talking to Siri, it is a portion of the Apple Intelligence algorithm that has been taught to be a smart assistant, but it still doesn't have access to the entire width and breadth of information on the web. That's why it has to pass information to a Google search or to ChatGPT. That isn't going to magically go away, but it can summarize some of the stuff coming in. And instead of saying, well, I found these websites, it can say, well, these websites summarized tell me this information. That's the difference. And it's going to be infinitely useful, and Siri will be better. But I wonder if people have expectations that it's going to be some huge magical difference, that like it's going to suddenly be better at everything because it's somehow quote unquote intelligent. And as I've said before, remember, Apple Intelligence is not intelligent. So artificial intelligence, just in general, it is not an intelligent technology. It can't think. So whatever expectations you have, maybe temper them a bit, because I'm just not really sure what people out there are expecting, but the people I've talked to have these very unrealistic, wild ideas about what it's supposed to be doing, and it's just not that. The APIs are going to be cool, and it's going to be very useful. It's what's going to eventually allow you to say, when is my mom arriving at the airport? And it's going to pull information from iMessage and mail and combine it all. It's actually funny. This system, this App Intent system, we might actually see a portion version of it in iOS 18.2 when it releases. So a small portion of this might actually release early. The 18.4 version is the one that lets you pull from not on-screen apps. This system that's being built now that we're talking about is for on-screen data only. So we could see the on-screen version of this launch in 18.2, and that'll be interesting.
Well, this is going to be can open worms everywhere, but I'll try to ask it quickly, because you're just saying that about the different versions of iOS 18. I'm on the beta test for 18.2. I am in the UK, even though I have set my region to the US so that I can use the App Intelligence features and things. There are still certain things I'm not getting. But one of the things I was very keen to try out was the new AirPods Pro hearing test features, which I know are in 18.1, but they are not in my copy of 18.2. I assume this is because the different things are being developed at different times, and when it becomes publicly available, 18.2 will have that subsumed into it. Is that sensible, or am I in fact somehow messing up something by using betas everywhere?
I think it's a beta thing. I think maybe a different... The release for 18.1 that enabled the feature was internally ahead of the current beta, so the next beta would have all of the release features of 18.1 baked into 18.2. Right? They test these in parallel, but they're one step different from each other a lot of the time. And because 18.2 can't have features that haven't released yet in 18.1, for example, so they would have to add those back in retroactively once 18.1 launches. It's a lot of fun, I'm sure, being internal at Apple.
Yeah.
The whole thing with Apple Intelligence, I think, is interesting. And I wanted to ask about, have you been playing with visual intelligence more, or have you tried Genmoji or Image Playground, any of those features?
Isn't that funny? I haven't tried Genmoji. I suppose because I don't... For messages, I use like those word things. I never think about doing anything else. Right. But just the day there's a hit song that's only written in emoji, talk to me then, okay? Also, the Roman Empire. What did they do? They wrote emoji, basically, called it something else, but it's effectively emoji, and civilization died, so I might be overblowing it there. I have used Image Playground, and there are some things I think it's really... I was going to say, the word that came to mind was pretty. I don't know if it'd be useful, but it was fun to try, and I had a happy hour trying different things, but nothing I then actually subsequently used anywhere. Whereas visual intelligence, because of this thing being on the different betas, I forgot visual intelligence was in 18.2, and I had to take a photograph of electricity meter, a thing going on with our provider, and I must have coughed or hesitated because I pushed a button the camera control button for too long, and instead of taking a photograph, it told me what an electric meter was. And since that happened, I'm addicted to it, checking out everything. It's quite funny when it's totally wrong, but also really good when it's great. I was walking around a garden centre, and in theory, I sounded so informed because of visual intelligence. But because beta again, different countries and all this stuff, it was giving me all the American names for flowers. And people were giving me funny looks because apparently flowers have different names in different countries. Who would have knew these things? But there we go. Have you become obsessed with visual intelligence?
I think visual intelligence is an interesting tool. I haven't found many uses in my life just yet, but I will say, I think maybe I mentioned this on the show before. This is deja vu. Food Noms has an excellent use of artificial intelligence. I think they're using ChatGPT inside their app to capture a photo of your food, and it analyzes it, fetches it, what it thinks it is using image recognition, and then analyzes the names of the foods that it's come up with to come up with recipes, and then uses those recipes to generate what it thinks the calorie content and fat content of that is, and then logs it to Food Noms for the Apple Health app. And it is an absolutely phenomenal use of the technology, and I think will be a perfect example of something that could be baked into, say, visual intelligence through one of these APIs in the future. Rather than passing an image to Google image search, I could pass it directly to Food Noms and say, hey, go ahead and analyze this and say it's my lunch. And then one click, bam, here's my food. Now it's logged, done. That's what this stuff is about. And I wanted to bring it up because I've always been down on this technology because people expect it to take over the world. It's a good technology for when it's used properly. When you use a hammer on a nail, it works, and it works great. When this technology is used correctly, like in that example, it works great. And I'm excited for more applications like that in the future. And I think Apple Intelligence enables that. So
I do remember a BBC drama that had a character who was meant to be overweight. I mean, characters on TV, you barely notice if they are or not, but he went to eat a Mars bar or something, a chocolate bar of some description, and the phone bleeped and said, no, you shouldn't. And I looked at that and it angered me that it could be so stupidly wrong. But at least, there's a possibility. That's a thought. Mentioning chocolate, I would like what you just said as long as I could edit the details to remove any mention of chocolate. So, right, I think I'm revealing a lot there. Anyway, one thing I want to say about Apple Insider, you've mentioned this before, about leaving us 5-star reviews, and I love 5-star reviews, but we do get a range of them, and there seems to be a thing in the BBC where, well, this isn't like a real rule, it's certainly not written in the producer's guidelines or anything, but there was a general perception when I was there that if you were getting an equal number of complaints from, left and right politically, and if you're being praised and criticised factually equally, then you must be doing something right, which I think is disputable. But in this case, you found one review waiting for us, and I found another.
Well,
DDX, sorry, you about to say?
Well, I think we accept all reviews here. It's fine. If you don't want to leave a 5-star review, leave the 1-star review, and we'll still it's fine. As I've said before, honestly, I read all reviews and I examine them, and if it's something that needs to be addressed or changed, I address or change it. But if I think it's nonsense, it's nonsense. But it's still worth hearing your opinions because they might help us address the show. But go ahead. It's DDoS.
All I would add there. Right. I write all of the reviews, so you see that's how that works. But yes, I'm sorry. Could you say that name again? Because I'm really struggling with those syllables. DD something.
Yeah.
Right. What he just said. Left a review saying so boring. No one wants to hear about Nintendo and Pokemon. They put me to sleep.
That was a summary, but of the review, it was more of a paragraph. But yeah, well,
was it a longer
just briefly longer.
Right. Wait. You didn't do an Apple Intelligence on this and shrink it down. Okay. Okay.
But that's what it said. It basically no other information was in that paragraph. I could go read the full thing if you really want me to. But
No,
basically, yeah, they were just like, no one wants to hear about Pokemon. This is so boring. You guys put me to sleep. That kind of stuff. And it's okay. We were not talking about Pokemon just to talk about it. It was about the apps that were releasing. Nintendo were releasing a lot of apps. They're very popular. Pokemon Go was a phenomenon. And anytime Nintendo does anything on an iOS device, it's news, I think. It just happens to be news that I enjoy because I enjoy Pokemon. But I understand that maybe you don't come to the Apple Insider podcast to hear about things like that. But Apple Insider as a whole, as a publication, is a tech-adjacent show. It is an Apple-adjacent show, but it is still a tech-adjacent website. We still cover any news that could be parallel to Apple, and I think an app launching on the App Store is pretty as parallel as you can get to Apple. And as my lovely editor and friend Mike Worthley would say, we don't make the website for you, DDoS Sin. So there will be things in the show, maybe on Apple Insider's webpage, that not everyone wants to hear about or read, but there is a lovely skip 30 seconds button built into every podcast.
Don't tell people that. One thing I need to say there, because I think actually I've been a bit unreasonable in this. I've kind of exploited the fact that I get to actually talk to you on this. I come to the Apple Insider podcast very often, knowing there's a news thing that's like Nintendo or Pokemon that I'm interested enough to know more about, even though I wouldn't bother playing the games. And I know you know. So I get really keen to ask you these things, and I might well lead you down, not so much a road, more a corridor or something for it. So I will watch my selfishness of that, but I would point out that anybody listening can email you directly and ask exactly the same thing. In fact, actually, before I mentioned the opposite review, the very nice review, how can people find you to ask you things? Well, I'm asking for myself.
Like I said, I appreciate the review. I don't mean to shut it down, but I do think this one was a little on the sillier side. So excuse my reaction, but thanks for the review. And please, as always, anyone listening, you can write the review. We'll read it here on the show. We're happy to hear your opinions. I think we do a pretty good job here. If you think you're falling asleep, maybe find a different podcast. But I know, William. If you guys want to find me, if you want to leave me a nice email or nasty email, you can always find my email at the top of any article I've written. Click the email button. It's wes@appleinsider.com. Or you can find me on Mastodon. I'm at HillyTech. I'm there quite often talking about nonsense around tech and probably Pokemon as well. And yeah, there's not much else that I'm doing on the internet. I have this little blog thing that I try to pretend that I'm actually writing sometimes. But otherwise, not really much. You can just find me on Apple Insider.
Actually, we must put a link to your blog because I've been reading that and enjoying it. One thing you didn't mention there, because you're not doing much on it, is Twitter. I am still around on Twitter. And I like many people, I've wondered, but one reason to stay was actually this week, Tony Fisher on Twitter left a nice message saying, in this exciting time for all things Apple, I've discovered a must-listen every week. Honest analysis and topical tech banter from William Gallagher and Wesley Hilliard. Thank you, Tony. That actually really brightened my day. There. Okay. But now, apart from Apple Insider Plus, obviously, which will be on in just a moment, I think we should say
William,
that's it for this
where
edition
are you
of the
on the
Apple
internet?
Insider. Oh, no? Oh, I nearly got away with that, didn't I? That's a very good point. Twitter, I suppose, as W. Gallagher. I'm not on there as much as I used to be. I used to be obsessed with it, but I'm still there. Email is probably the best, william@appleinsider.com, or I do have a YouTube channel, which is Apple-based mostly, but really for writers. That's 58 Keys on YouTube, and that has now well over 10,000 subscribers, which is making me very happy. So, thank you for letting me plug that in there. Seriously, though, this has to be the end of the episode of the podcast because we've got to get on Top Insider Plus, and I'm dying to hear what you think about that as well. Thank you very much for listening. And actually, thanks to our sponsor, Masterclass. I mean, seriously, the Jodie Foster Masterclass, she is so interesting. Yeah. If you are a subscriber, just hold on for one moment and we'll be back with App Insider Plus. But otherwise, speak to you next week.
Talk to you guys next week.